On December 27th, my mother texted, "New Year's is just for your sister's family." I replied, "Perfect. Not because I accepted, but because in my Times Square tower, my door was about to open for everyone else who had been left behind. When the fireworks go off, who is the one truly humiliated? And why does a small keychain hanging by the balcony door silence my entire family? My name is Noelle Farrow. In the circles that matter in Manhattan, the name means nothing. That is deliberate. Success, in my experience, is most potent when it is quiet. I live in a space defined by glass and altitude, high above the noise, and I have cultivated a life as clean and severe as the skyline. I am in my late 20s, and I have made my fortune by seeing the patterns in chaos, by making things move, by ensuring the essential components arrive while others are still debating the logistics. I am the architect of a silent, efficient world, my own. The text message arrived on the 27th of December. It lit up the dark screen of my phone, a block of invasive, unwelcome light in the gray calm of my living room. It was from my mother, Judith. The message was concise, a hallmark of her most deliberate exclusions. "Noelle, we are keeping New Year's small this year. It will just be Savannah's family and us. We will celebrate with you another time. Just your sister's family, not just family." The distinction was precise, a surgical cut, separating the necessary from the optional. I looked at the words. I felt the old, familiar chill, the phantom sensation of a door being quietly shut in my face. But this time, it was different. I did not feel the sting of rejection. I felt the click of a final tumbler falling into place. My fingers moved without hesitation. I typed one word. Perfect. I sent it. Then I powered the phone off, not just silencing it, off. The black mirror of the screen reflected the vast, empty perfection of my apartment. I felt calm. I felt a stillness that had been years in the preparation. This was not a sudden wound. It was the confirmation of a diagnosis I had made long ago. The secret to my peace, the secret to the absolute stillness in my chest, was all around me. I was standing in a $7 million penthouse, a wraparound citadel of glass overlooking the very center of the universe. Times Square. No one knew, not my mother, not my sister, not my father. My name was not on the deed, not on any document a journalist or a curious relative could find. My ownership was buried 3 layers deep in an anonymous LLC, registered in a state that prides itself on privacy, filed by a law firm that specializes in making billionaires disappear. My success was not just quiet, it was invisible. I walked toward the glass. The apartment was a wedge of light, and the entire northern face was a single, uninterrupted wall of floor-to-ceiling windows, curving into a balcony that ran the full perimeter. I pressed my palm against the glass. It was thick, cold as a river stone, and absolutely silent. Outside, the wind was a visible force, a high-altitude shear that smelled of cold steel, static, and the first hints of snow. It was a sterile, powerful smell, the scent of the city's bones. Down below, the world was a frantic, silent movie. The crowds were a smear of color. The massive, building-sized LED screens were already flashing, selling soda and Broadway shows and the promise of a new year. I thought of the child I had been, the girl on the beige carpet in Ohio, watching this exact scene on a flickering 20-inch television screen, that girl who pressed her face to the static-charged glass, believing the people under that glittering ball were the luckiest, most important people in the world, believing that being there, at the center, was the one thing that proved you mattered. That child used to watch the countdown, separated from the world by a pane of glass and 1,000 miles. Now, I stood above it all, separated only by glass I had paid for. I was not watching the party. I owned the view. The decision was instant. It was not a thought, but an impulse, a chemical reaction to my mother's text. This place, this fortress of solitude, was about to change its purpose. I would open my doors, not for the people who expected it, not for the glittering, empty society climbers of Manhattan. I would open my door for the others, the ones who, like me, had been pushed to the edge of the frame, the ones who were always another time, the ones who were told the table was full. Belonging is not something you are given. It is not a gift that people like my mother can grant or withhold. Belonging is a structure. It is a thing you build, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, until it is high enough and strong enough to keep the cold out. And then, you install a very, very large door. My gaze drifted to the side of the massive sliding glass panel that led to the balcony. There, I had installed a single, brushed steel hook. It was small, almost invisible against the frame. A simple piece of hardware, a place to hang a keychain. It had been a symbolic gesture when I moved in, a private joke, a hook for a key that no one else had. Now, it was something else. It was an anchor point. A silent challenge formed in my mind, a message sent south to the suburbs, to the small family gathering I was excluded from. You will not invite me? Fine, I will invite the world. I will invite everyone you forgot, everyone you deemed inconvenient, and I will give them the one thing you always hoarded, the front row. I turned my full attention back to the window. The first flakes of snow had begun to fall. They were not the soft, gentle flakes of my childhood memories. They were hard, driven, slicing through the artificial daylight of the city. They streaked past the glass, disappearing into the canyon below. My view shifted from the immediate, frantic dance of the snow to the colossal, silent glow of the LED screens. They painted the swirling snow in flashes of blue, red, and electric white. The city was a spectacle. It was preparing for its great performance. Far below, I could almost feel the vibration, the thrum of 1,000,000 people beginning their pilgrimage to this one spot. It was a distant countdown, a pulse beneath the concrete. I stood in the absolute silence of my fortress, and I felt my own heartbeat begin to match it, thud for thud, a premonition, a sense of something massive, inevitable, and explosive. The countdown had already begun. The view from my penthouse is clean. It is steel, glass, and light, but my memories have a different texture. They smell of Mapleford, Ohio. They smell of damp pine needles in the driveway and the specific, sweet-sour scent of burning oak from chimneys in December. It is the smell of a place that is perpetually cold, a place where warmth is something you have to huddle around, and there is never quite enough to go around. In that house, in that world, there was my sister, Savannah, and there was me. Savannah was the center. She was warmth. She was light. She was the one who was brilliant in every family photograph. Her laughter was the soundtrack to our holidays. I was not the opposite. I was not the shadow. I was simply other. I was the self-sufficient one. That was the label my parents gave me, and it was the most convenient lie they ever told. It was a justification, a permission slip to not have to worry about me. Noelle can handle it. Noelle is fine on her own. Noelle knows how to self-soothe, how to be her own parent. I was taught to be the good one, which meant being the quiet one. The holidays were always the clearest illustration of this dynamic. Christmas was a simple, visible imbalance of capital. Savannah would be buried in a mountain of bright, frivolous, expensive boxes. She received the things she wanted. I received the things I needed. Practical sweaters, new boots because my old ones had holes, gift cards for books. My pile was smaller, denser, heavier with practicality. Hers was a cloud of impulsive desire, all of it granted. But Christmas was just an imbalance. New Year's Eve was the real cut. It was the night that formalized the family structure. It was the night that taught me my true place. The deepest cut happened when I was 14. For weeks, my parents had talked about this year being different. We're all going to go downtown, my father, Robert, announced. The whole family will go to the square, see the local countdown, maybe get hot chocolate. It was a promise of inclusion. For once, I would be part of the whole family, not the logistical support for it. The evening of December 31st arrived. The house was full of the smell of my mother's perfume and the sound of Savannah's excitement. I was dressed. I was wearing the practical sweater I'd gotten for Christmas. I was waiting by the door. My mother, Judith, came down the stairs, zipping her coat. She looked at me, and her smile faltered, replaced by a look of mild inconvenience. "Oh, Noelle, honey," she said, her voice dropping into the register she used for giving instructions. "Listen, your father and I were talking. Savannah is just so excited, and you know how she gets in big crowds. It's going to be a lot to manage." I knew this preamble. It was the sound of a door slowly closing. "And," my father added, coming up behind her, "someone really needs to stay with the house. We don't want to leave it empty. You're so responsible. You wouldn't mind, would you? We won't be late." I did mind. I minded with the entire burning, acidic force of my 14-year-old heart. But I was the self-sufficient one, the responsible one. I knew my lines. "It's fine," I said. My voice sounded small. "See," my mother said, her relief immediate. She smiled, a bright, brittle flash. "You're the best. Noelle, we'll bring you back something." They left. Savannah, bundled in a new pink coat, glanced back at me from the doorway, her expression not triumphant, just blank. I was not part of her equation. I was a piece of furniture in the house she was leaving. The house went silent. The sound of their car fading down the snowy street was the loneliest sound in the world. I was left with the smell of their perfume and the silence. I walked into the living room. The television was on, tuned to the broadcast from New York City. I sat on the beige carpet, the one I can still feel the synthetic fibers of. I watched the glittering chaos, the sea of people in Times Square. They were so happy, so together, all screaming and cheering, part of one massive, singular moment. And I was in a silent house in Ohio, watching them. The countdown began. The host on the screen was screaming. The crowd was a single voice. 10, 9, 8. I stood up and walked to the television. 7, 6, 5. I raised my hand. 4, 3. I pressed my palm against the glass screen. It was warm, alive with static electricity that prickled my skin. 2, 1. The ball dropped. The crowd roared. Confetti exploded, and in my living room, there was only the sound of my own breathing. My hand on the glass. The screen was the boundary. It was the line between the people who were part of the celebration and the people who were forced to watch it. I was on the outside of the glass. That was the night I learned the most important lesson of my life. The spotlight is only given to those who are praised for being in it. The quiet, necessary work. The work of holding the house together, of being responsible, of being the infrastructure, is not just forgotten, it is actively punished. It is used as the very reason to exclude you. Your reliability becomes your cage. After that night, I changed. I stopped asking to be included. I stopped waiting by the door. I stopped trying to get into the photographs. If they were going to treat me as invisible, I would master the art. I became a ghost in my own home. I moved from demanding their attention to starving them of my presence. I learned to blend into the wallpaper, to make my footsteps silent, to require nothing. It was a defense mechanism. It was the art of disappearing. My father, Robert, was a man of simple affirmations. He was proud of Savannah for her C+ average, for her participation trophy in soccer. He would boom, "That's my girl," and tousle her hair. My academic awards, my perfect grades, my early acceptance letters, they earned me a distracted pat on the head. "Great, Noelle, great. Knew you could do it." His pride was reserved for the one who struggled, the one who made noise. My competence bored him. My mother's voice was a scalpel. When she spoke to Savannah, her voice was high, full of light and admiration. "Oh, honey, that's amazing. Tell me every single detail." When she spoke to me, her voice dropped to a monotone of pure utility. "Noelle, the dishwasher is full. Noelle, I need you to look up the directions to your aunt's house. Noelle, your sister needs help with her homework." I was not a daughter. I was a personal assistant. I was a utility. I found my refuge in the one place no one ever went, the garage. It was cold, and it smelled of gasoline, damp concrete, and my father's forgotten hobbies. It smelled of oil and metal. I loved it. I loved it because machines were logical. They were fair. I found an old, broken lawnmower engine. I found the manual. I took it apart, cleaned every piece, and, following the logic of the schematic, I put it back together, I pulled the cord, and it started. The roar of the engine was the most satisfying sound in the world. A machine obeys the rules. It does not care if you are bright or quiet. It does not care about your sister. If you do the work correctly, if you follow the logic, it rewards you with function. People were the opposite. They were illogical, emotional, unfair systems that rewarded the loudest and punished the most competent. So I became the mechanic. I became the silent spine of the house. I fixed the router when the internet went down. I reset the circuit breakers. I handled the travel logistics. I filed the paperwork. I was the unseen, unacknowledged infrastructure that allowed their chaotic, center-stage lives to function smoothly. And in doing so, I was permanently trapped in the supporting role. But in that cold garage, staring at the clean logic of an engine block, a new ambition was born. It was not a dream of revenge, not then. It was a dream of physics, a dream of a different life. I did not want to be in their picture. I wanted to own the camera. I wanted to own the room. I looked out the garage's grimy window at the gray, flat Ohio sky, and I thought, one day, I will have a place of my own, a place so high up, no one can miss it, a place with a balcony, where I can see the world, and I am the one who writes the guest list. I will not be the one left in the house. I will be the one who owns the house, and the view. The acceptance letter arrived in a thin, white envelope. It was not from Ohio. It was from the West Coast, a place that, to my family, was as abstract and distant as the moon. The university was known for its systems engineering program, for its unsparing focus on data and structure. I had applied without telling anyone. When I placed the letter on the kitchen table, my mother glanced at it between sorting mail. "California?" she said, her voice holding the same tone she used for a piece of rotten fruit. "Noelle, that's so far away. It's impractical. And the cost." "I have scholarships," I said. It was not the whole truth. I also had loans and a plan to work. "It's just inconvenient," my father said, not looking up from his paper. "What's wrong with the state school?" What was wrong was that it was here. It was in the orbit of their casual disregard. They saw my escape as a logistical problem for them. I saw it as the only logical solution. I chose to go. There was no farewell party. There was no tearful drive to the airport. On a Tuesday night in August, I packed one large black suitcase. It contained everything I had deemed essential. My family was in the living room, watching a game show. The sound of the canned laughter followed me as I walked down the hall. "I'm leaving now," I said from the doorway. My mother looked up, distracted. "Oh, all right, honey, be safe. Call us when you get there." My father gave a vague wave. Savannah was not even in the room. I walked out the front door and pulled my suitcase down the dark, cracked driveway. I did not look back. I walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. The Greyhound bus arrived at 2:03 a.m. I handed the driver my ticket, stored my suitcase in the bay, and found a seat by a window. The bus smelled of stale air and diesel. As it pulled away, I watched Mapleford dissolve into a smear of dim streetlights. I felt nothing but the hum of the engine beneath my feet. It was the sound of a system in motion, the sound of a problem being solved. The next 4 years were a compressed blur of work. I did not live the college life I saw in brochures. I lived the life of a machine executing a function. I studied. I worked shifts. I slept on sofas in shared apartments that were always cold. I took the night shift at the campus library, the graveyard shift at a 24-hour diner. I became nocturnal, a creature of fluorescent light and cheap coffee. In my second winter, the heater in our apartment broke. I spent 3 weeks wrapped in my coat, my laptop on my knees, my fingers aching from the cold as I typed. The blue glow of the screen on my face was my only warmth. I learned to code not as an art, but as a weapon. It was in a second-year elective that I found my focus. Introduction to Logistics. While other students were bored by supply chains and routing algorithms, I was captivated. It was the garage, magnified to a global scale. It was the study of making chaos flow in an orderly, predictable line. It was the science of preventing failure. How to get a thing from here to there with the least amount of friction, in the least amount of time, for the least amount of money. It was a beautiful, logical puzzle. I started small. I found a part-time job at an independent bookstore that was failing, drowning in its own inventory. Our delivery system is a mess, the owner told me, his hands stained with ink. I spent a weekend in their back office. I wrote a small, simple piece of code, a script that cross-referenced their orders with local delivery routes. It was not revolutionary, but it was logical. I optimized their routes. I cut their delivery time by 60%. The owner stared at the screen, then at me. How? You were driving in circles, I said. Now you're not. He paid me $200. It felt more real than any A+ on a transcript. I had taken a broken system and I had made it function. The computer lab at night became my sanctuary. It was quiet, save for the click, click, click of my keyboard and the high, steady hum of the servers in the next room. It was the sound of a steady, persistent drumbeat, my drumbeat. While the rest of the campus was out at parties, I was building systems. While they were learning to network with people, I was learning to network data. I worked through the holidays. I did not go home. On New Year's Eve, I sat in the empty, sterile lab. Through the window, I could see fireworks exploding over the distant city skyline. I did not watch a ball drop. I did not press my hand to a screen. I just sipped a cold coffee and debugged a piece of code. My only wish, my only resolution, repeated year after year, I will stand high enough to see the entire city, not just the reflection of it, and I will not be watching, I will be working. In my senior year, I took an internship at a small, regional freight company. It was not a glamorous tech firm. It was a dusty office with metal desks, attached to a warehouse that smelled of cardboard and exhaust. I was assigned to problem accounts. That is where I found the gap. It was a small hospital network. Their account was a mess of red flags, late payments, and panicked calls. They're impossible, my manager said. They're always complaining about late supplies, but their orders are chaos. I looked at their manifests. It was not chaos. It was desperation. They were ordering critical medical supplies, sterile kits, reagents, specific medications, at the last possible second, and paying insane rush fees. I drove to the hospital. I sat in the waiting room and watched. I saw a nurse look at a clipboard and make a frantic call. I saw a doctor yelling into a phone in a supply closet. This was not a business problem. This was a systems failure. People were getting sick, and this hospital, the place designed to fix them, was broken because its supply chain was illogical. I went back to my apartment. I took every sticky note I owned. I started mapping it on my wall. The supplier, the distributor, the freight company, the hospital receiving dock, the operating room. The points of failure were not just one place. They were in the communication between the places. The system was blind. It was a series of disconnected, shouting voices with no central brain. The idea came to me, not as a flash of light, but as a clean, cold schematic. What if they were not disconnected? What if you could build a digital nervous system? A single platform where the operating room's inventory count could speak directly to the supplier's warehouse and automatically trigger a shipment that was tracked in real time by the freight company? What if you could make the system see itself? It was the lawnmower engine. It was the bookstore's delivery routes. It was my entire life, my obsession with logic, all pointing to this one, massive, broken machine. I bought a whiteboard. I drew the architecture. I needed a name for the project file. I thought of the structure I was building, a network, a grid, and I thought of what it was carrying, the lifeblood of the system. I typed lattice pulse. I worked for 72 hours straight. I forgot to eat. I drank water from the tap and coded. my room filled with the map of sticky notes, a web of yellow and pink. On the third day, I ran the first simulation. It worked. The test data flowed, from patient to supplier and back, in a clean, uninterrupted loop. I leaned back in my chair. The sun was coming up, painting the wall of sticky notes in a pale, gray light. I felt a sensation I had never experienced before. It was not pride. It was not happiness. It was a profound, seismic click of alignment. For the first time in my life, I had built something that was not just functional, but necessary. I had built something that people in desperate need, would have to rely on. I thought of the house in Mapleford. I thought of the girl who was self-sufficient, the girl who was the optional, extra part, the spare child. In the cold light of my apartment, surrounded by the architecture of my idea, I felt that girl finally, fully, disappear. She was not needed. My prototype of lattice pulse was not a theory for long. It was as if I had built a fire break just as the forest fire was starting. A few months after I graduated, the crisis hit. It was not one single event, but a cascade of failures. A flu season collided with a dock workers' strike, which collided with a blizzard in the Midwest. The media called it the Great Supply Chain Disruption. I called it the inevitable result of illogical systems. Hospitals, the ones I had identified as vulnerable, were now desperate. The calls began. The first one was not from a CEO. It was from the same hospital procurement manager I had spoken to during my internship. His name was David. Noel? His voice was strained, thin with exhaustion. I don't know if you remember me. You were the intern. You had ideas. I remember you. David, I said, my laptop already open. We're canceling elective surgeries, he said, his voice cracking. We're hours away from running out of basic sterile kits. The big suppliers, they can't even give us a delivery date. It's all force majeure. We're blind. I heard you started something. Does it work? Does it actually work? It's a beta, I said. It was a lie. It was an alpha. A single-user prototype running on a cloud server I was paying for by the hour. I don't care, he snapped. If you can get me a confirmed arrival time for 1 box of sutures, just one, I'll give you anything. We're desperate. We'll be your test case. What do you need? I need your supplier logins, your shipping manifests, and your internal inventory API, I said, and I need them 5 minutes ago. He gave me everything. That night, Lattice Pulse went from a project to a public utility, a cluster of 6 hospitals, all in David's network, plugged into my system. Their desperation was my key. I did not sleep for 36 hours. I did not move from my chair. My small room was lit only by the glow of 3 monitors. I drank black coffee until my hands shook, and then I switched to water. The system was live. The data was pouring in. It was a torrent. I was not just a coder anymore. I was an air traffic controller for a system in crisis. My screen was a map. The hospitals were glowing red. The suppliers were yellow. The trucks, the ones I could get data pings from, were white dots. At first, it was chaos. Just a screen full of emergencies. Then, I started to work. I rerouted a shipment from a non-critical hospital to David's ER. I found a pallet of kits sitting in a warehouse in a different state and forced the system to dispatch a truck. I built a predictive algorithm on the fly to model which hospital would run out of what and when. Slowly, the map began to change. The white dots of the truck started to move in clean, logical lines. The red alerts at the hospitals began to blink, one by one, to yellow, then to green. The data streams, which had been a frantic scream, settled into a steady rhythm. My map, my screen. It was no longer a picture of chaos. It was a circulatory system. The routes of the trucks lit up, branching and converging. It looked like the veins of a living thing. At the 36-hour mark, an email popped up from David. It was one sentence. They're here. The kits are at the dock. I read it once, then I read it again. I looked at the map. The ER was green. The surgery wing was green. I had taken the chaos and I had made it flow. I closed my laptop, I stood up, and the blood rushed from my head. I fell onto my bed and slept for 14 hours. When I woke up, my inbox had 200 new emails. The subject line was the same for all of them. Lattice Pulse. David's trial had become a permanent, non-negotiable contract. He had sent an email to the procurement head of every hospital network he knew, with a screenshot of his green-lit inventory. "This is not a trial," he wrote. "This is a must-have." The rumor spread through the industry like a virus, but a beneficial one. I was not a company, I was a solution. I had to hire 2 other coders from my graduating class just to handle the server migration. The signups were not linear, they were exponential. We were not just a service, we were infrastructure. We were the nervous system that the entire industry, in its moment of panic, discovered it could not live without. The media came next, tech blogs, then business journals, then the mainstream news. They wanted the story. They wanted the face. They wanted the female founder narrative. I said no to all of them. "They want an interview," my new, very overwhelmed lawyer told me. "Send them the code," I said. "What?" "Lattice Pulse is the story. Its function is the story. My face is irrelevant. My backstory is irrelevant." I retreated. I let the work speak. The more I refused to be the story, the more the story grew. In the absence of a face, they filled the void with speculation. They called me the invisible architect, the logistics ghost. My refusal to play the game became, ironically, my brand. The system was the star. It was quiet. It was efficient. And it did not need your approval. It just worked. The countdown, the real one, took 18 months. 18 months of scaling. 18 months of building a real company. A quiet, efficient machine that mirrored the logic of its own code. Then the call came. It was not a tech blog. It was a managing director at the largest logistics corporation in the world. They were the whale, and they had missed the boat. Their own multi-billion-dollar R&D was trying, and failing, to replicate what I had built in my apartment. They did not want to partner. They wanted to buy. The meeting took place not in their glass tower, but in my lawyer's conference room, a beige box in a suburban office park. They were men in $8,000 suits. I was in my uniform, black jeans, a gray sweater. They talked for an hour. They used words like synergy and vertical integration. I waited until they were done. "The price," I said. The managing director smiled, a thin, tight expression. "We're prepared to make a very generous offer. $100 million. I stood up. I picked up my laptop bag. "Thank you for your time." "Wait," he said, the smile gone. "That's a 9-figure offer." "Your system is bleeding," I said. "Your hospital clients are leaving you in droves. You are not buying a company. You are buying a tourniquet. The price is not $100 million. I got to the door. $120 million, he said. My lawyer, who had been silent, made a small choking sound. $120 million. And you? We need you to stay on for 2 years to manage the integration. I will not stay, I said, turning around. The system is the asset, not me. You can buy the code. I am not for sale. That is the deal. He stared at me for a long time. He saw that I was not negotiating. I was stating a fact. The deal is the deal, he said. I signed the papers in my old apartment, the one with the broken heater. I had never moved. The absurdity of it was sharp. I was signing a document that transferred $120 million into an entity I controlled, and I was doing it on a cheap, particle board desk, sitting on a folding chair. My pen, a blue disposable, ran out of ink. I had to borrow my lawyer's. When it was done, the room was silent. Congratulations, Noel, my lawyer said. His voice hushed. You are spectacularly wealthy. I looked out the window at the parking lot. I felt nothing, no explosion, no triumph. I was waiting for the roar, the feeling of victory. It did not come. Instead, there was just a quiet, profound whisper. It was one word. Free. I did not buy a yacht. I did not buy a fleet of cars. I did not buy an island. I did not want any of the things that screamed new money. I wanted the one thing I had dreamed of in the garage, the one thing I had sworn to myself in the computer lab. I wanted the view. I wanted the balcony. I did not go to a real estate agent. I went to a different kind of lawyer, the kind who had privacy and asset protection on their door. I want to buy a specific piece of real estate. I told him, I want to do it in a way that my name is never attached. I want to buy the highest, best view of Times Square. The hunt was quiet. It was a series of encrypted emails and private listings. We were not looking for a home. We were acquiring an asset. It was a fortress, a vantage point. He found it, a penthouse. The listing was private, uncirculated. A foreign investor was quietly liquidating. The price was $7 million. We will pay cash, I instructed, through the LLC. 3 weeks later, I was standing in a polished, empty elevator. It opened directly into the apartment. It was empty, just glass, sky, and silence. A representative from the law firm was there. He was not a real estate agent. He did not try to sell me on the finishes. He just handed me a small, heavy, brushed steel key. It was not for the apartment. It was the override key for the private elevator. It's done, Ms. Farrow, he said. He did not call me by my name. He used the name on the LLC's charter. He left. I was alone. I walked through the vast, empty space. The city was screaming, but I could not hear it. The glass was inches thick. I walked to the balcony door, slid the massive panel open, and stepped out. The wind hit me. It was a physical blow. A rush of cold, steel-scented air. The sound of the city, the roar I had been promised, rose up and hit me all at once. Horns, sirens, music, a million voices. I stood at the railing. I was above it all. I was at the center. I held the small, cold, steel key in my hand. I have my balcony. The symbol I had built in my mind, the totem of my escape, was now concrete. It was steel. It was glass. It was real. I stood in the silence of the penthouse, my phone off. My mother's text was not just an exclusion. It was a catalyst. It was the final piece of data I needed to run the simulation. The plan that formed was not one of revenge, not in the simple, crude way my sister might have imagined. It was a plan of correction, a logistical solution to a systemic emotional failure. My family was not just my parents and Savannah. That was the official narrative, the one curated by my mother, but there were others, the cousins, the aunts, the grandparents, the B-list, the ones who were too loud, or too quiet, or too complicated, or not successful enough in the narrow, approved way, the ones, like me, who were deemed inconvenient. I turned my phone back on. I did not call my mother. I went to my contacts and found the name Rain. Rain was my cousin, my mother's sister's daughter. She was 5 years older, a high school art teacher, perpetually broke, and unapologetically honest. She was the one who, at a Thanksgiving years ago, had looked at my father after he praised Savannah's mediocre grades and said, "That's great. Uncle Robert, did you know Noelle just won the state physics prize?" The silence that followed had been monumental. I called her. She picked up on the third ring. "Noelle?" Her voice was scratchy, surprised. "This is a weird number. You okay?" "I'm fine. Rain, I have a question. What are you doing for New Year's?" I heard a sharp, humorless laugh. "What do you think? Aunt Judith just informed me that this year is immediate family only, which is her polite code for Savannah is the only grandchild who matters. So, I guess I'm staying home, getting drunk, and watching the ball drop on TV, wishing I could afford to be anywhere else." "She sent you the text, too," I said. It was not a question. "She called," Rain corrected. "She wanted to hear me say it was okay. I didn't give her the satisfaction." "Why?" "Because," I said, walking toward the wall of glass. "I'm watching the ball drop, too, but I'm watching it from above, and I have an extra room, About 3,000 square feet of it. Silence. Noelle, what are you talking about? I own a penthouse, Rain, overlooking Times Square, and I am inviting everyone who was inconvenient. You are at the top of the list. Can you be in Manhattan on the 31st? More silence. Then, a choked sound. Are you serious? A penthouse? Times Square? Completely serious. I'll send a car for you. And Rain? Who else got the immediate family-only treatment? Oh, God. Noelle. Everyone. Evan. For sure. Aunt Marla. Definitely. And Grandma June. Judith told June she didn't want her to have to make the long drive in the cold. Can you believe that? Her own mother. Good, I said, a cold, clear sense of purpose settling over me. That's my guest list. Call them. Tell them it's handled. Tell them to pack a bag. I'll take care of the logistics. Noelle, Rain said, her voice thick with an emotion I had not anticipated. You have no idea. It's justice. This is the first fair thing that's happened in this family in 20 years. I ended the call and began the operation. This was not a party. It was an event. It was a logistical exercise with an emotional payload. First, security. My building was not a normal apartment tower. It was a fortress. The private elevator was the only way in, and it was controlled by a key and a dispatch system. I sent a file to the building's head of security, a guest list, 30 names. These individuals, and only these individuals, are cleared for entry to the penthouse level on December 31st. I wrote, they will arrive at the private entrance. They will be checked against this list. They will be escorted to the elevator. No one else gets in. No exceptions. He replied with a simple understood. Next, I designed the experience. This could not feel like a cold, corporate event. It had to feel like the family dinner we all deserved but never got. It had to be warm. I hired a chef, not a caterer, a chef. I found him through a private contact. Luca, an Italian-American from Brooklyn who cooked for people who did not want to be seen in restaurants. His food was not fussy. It was vibrant, alive, and abundant. I called him. Chef, I said, I am hosting 30 people who have been told they are not important. I want you to cook them a meal that proves they are. He was quiet for a moment. I understand the brief, he said, his voice a warm baritone. No foam, no smears, just abundance, rosemary, garlic, slow-roasted meats, pasta made 10 minutes before they eat it. I'll be there. For music, I did not want a playlist. I wanted something alive. I hired a duo I had seen in a small jazz club downtown, a guitarist and a violinist. They played warm, intricate New York jazz that felt like a conversation. It was the perfect volume, loud enough to feel, quiet enough to talk over. The decor. My apartment was minimalist, all glass and gray stone. It needed a heart. I did not call a party planner. I called a florist and ordered masses of white hydrangeas and candlelight, hundreds of small, warm, yellow-toned lights, and against the main glass wall, I had a single, large, digital clock installed, its numbers a clean, white font, already counting down the days, hours, and minutes. But the centerpiece was the table. I had 2 custom-made tables commissioned. They were long, narrow, and made of reclaimed oak. I had them placed end to end, running the entire length of the main room, directly against the glass. It was one long, continuous surface. There was no head of the table. There was no foot. There was no kids' table. Every single seat was a front row seat. Every guest would be equal. Every guest would have the best view. It was my long table with no edge, a physical manifestation of inclusion. Then, the personal touches. This was not just about the view. It was about being seen. I spent a day finding gifts, one for each person. They were not expensive, but they were specific. For my grandmother, June, who was always cold, I found a rare, hand-woven herbal infusion teapot. For Evan, the cousin who played guitar, I had a custom capo engraved with his initials. For Rain, a set of imported professional-grade watercolor brushes for her kids, small, noise-canceling headphones for when the noise became too much. Each gift was a small, quiet message. I see you. I know who you are. I have been paying attention. In one corner, away from the food but near the warmth of the fireplace, I set up a small table. On it, I placed a stack of thick black cards and 2 gold pens. A small, framed sign read, "The Intentions Corner. Leave a habit from the old year. Take an intention for the new one." Finally, I prepped the balcony. It was my sacred space, and I wanted to share it, but it was high. The wind was serious. I had temporary high-strength glass wind barriers installed, the kind they use for rooftop restaurants. I had 3 tall, elegant heat lamps brought in, and on every chair, I had a thick, heavy gray wool blanket folded. Safety first, logistics, then warmth. The plan was complete. The system was built. Every contingency was accounted for. The chef, the music, the security, the warmth, the view. It was a fortress designed to be a home. It was the most intricate, expensive, and emotionally necessary system I had ever built. It was the antithesis of just Savannah's family. It was a declaration. Belonging was not a privilege to be granted by my mother. It was a right I was about to enforce. The apartment was quiet, a vacuum of potential. The musicians were tuning, the sound a delicate, hopeful scrape of string and fret. In the open kitchen, Chef Luca was plating the first appetizers, the scent of rosemary and roasted garlic becoming the baseline for the evening. The digital clock on the wall read 7:08 p.m. The countdown had begun. Then, the chime. It was not a loud, industrial sound, but a soft, high-pitched ding. The sound of the private elevator arriving. My entire nervous system went taut. The doors slid open. Rain stepped out. She was wearing a dark red dress, something she had probably bought at a thrift store and tailored herself. Her eyes were wide. She was holding a bottle of cheap sparkling wine. She took 3 steps into the room and stopped. Her mouth fell open. She did not look at me. She did not look at the food. She was staring, transfixed, at the wall of glass, at the living, breathing, electric monster that was Times Square on New Year's Eve. The sheer kinetic scale of it, the rivers of light, the unreality of the buildings that looked close enough to touch. "Noelle," she whispered. It was a prayer. It was an accusation. "This is not an apartment. This is the sky." Her 2 children, an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, did not share her paralysis. They shot past her like they had been fired from a cannon. They had no context for the cost, only for the spectacle. They sprinted across the stone floor and pressed their faces and hands to the glass, fogging it instantly. "Mom, look, that's the big TV, the one from the internet. It's right there." The older one, Leo, found the handle to the balcony door. He was a small boy, but he was determined. He used his whole body and managed to crack the seal. The sound hit us. It was not a sound. It was a physical wall of noise, a roar from a million throats, a composite of sirens, music, and energy. It rushed into the silent apartment, along with a blast of frigid, exhaust and pretzel-scented air. Laughter, sudden and sharp as a firecracker, burst from the children. I gently slid the heavy door closed. The silence of the penthouse dropped back into place, like a curtain. "We'll go out when it's closer to midnight," I said. "There are heat lamps." The chime went off again. The ice was broken. The room began to fill. Evan, my guitarist cousin, came in. He had his guitar case slung over his back, and his girlfriend, Maya, was at his side. She was holding a simple cardboard cake box. Evan just stopped and whistled. A long, low sound. "Noelle, this beats the hell out of my basement practice space." Maya stepped forward, her eyes cast down, clearly intimidated by the setting. I hope this is okay. I made a brown sugar spice cake. It's not fancy." Before I could answer, Luca's booming voice came from the kitchen. Not fancy? Kara, it is a sin to call a homemade cake not fancy. It is the most important thing. He emerged, a large man in a white apron, and took the box from her with the reverence of a surgeon. The smell. Cinnamon. You are a genius. This goes on the main table. He winked at her, and I watched her shoulders, which had been up by her ears, visibly drop. The kitchen was now a fusion of his rosemary and her spice. It smelled, impossibly, like a real home. The elevator chimed again, and again, the room filled. The B-list, the inconvenience. Aunt Marla, Rain's mother, was the last one from that group. She was a woman who felt everything, all the time, which was why my mother found her so exhausting. She stepped out, saw me standing there, and her face crumpled. She did not look at the view. She did not look at the food. She walked directly to me and crushed me in an embrace that smelled of wool and whatever perfume she had been wearing since 1985. She was heavy in my arms. She was shaking. She pulled back, her hands gripping my shoulders, her eyes streaming, ruining her mascara. "Oh, Noelle," she sobbed, not caring who heard. "You did it. You did the thing. You finally did the thing we all should have done. You made a place for us." I was not built for this. I was built for systems, for logic. But I put my hand on top of hers. "I'm glad you came, Aunt Marla." "Came, baby? I would have crawled." One final chime, the most important one. My grandmother, June, appeared. She was the last. She stepped out of the elevator with the help of her cane, but her spine was rigid. She was the matriarch my mother had sidelined. She took in the scene with a slow, methodical assessment. She saw the children by the window. She saw the long, unhierarchical table. She saw Evan, already tuning his guitar, creating a soft melody with the violinist I had hired. She saw the open kitchen and the abundant food. Then she looked at me. She walked over, her cane thudding quietly on the stone. She put her small, dry, wrinkled hand on my cheek. Her eyes were the same color as mine. "You were always the logical one, Noelle," she said, her voice a dry rustle, but clear. "I see now. You were building this the whole time, weren't you?" She turned, just slightly, to look at the room, at Rain, pouring her kids water, at Evan, laughing with Maya. "Well," she announced to no one in particular, "this is it. Then." "What's it, Mom?" Aunt Marla asked, wiping her eyes. "This," June said, pointing her chin at the long table. "From here, the family starts over." It was a judgment. It was a decree. The night began. The musicians started to play. It was warm. Acoustic New York jazz. The sounds of silverware on plates, of corks popping, of real, unrestrained conversation filled the space. Luca's food was not just food. It was a statement. Platters of roasted vegetables, bowls of handmade pasta, whole sides of fish. It was abundance. It was warmth. The light from the candles and the soft, yellow-toned lamps was a cocoon, holding us safe against the screaming, electric world just outside the glass. I slipped away from the table and went to the intentions corner. A few people had already been there. I saw Rain's bold, angry script on a black card. "Leave, apologizing for wanting peace." I saw Evans. "Leave, waiting for my turn." I picked up one of the heavy gold pens. The black card was cool in my hand. I thought about the house in Mapleford. I thought about the door being shut, the phone call I never received. I thought about the text message from 4 days ago, just Savannah's family. I wrote, "Leave, knocking on closed doors." I turned the card over, take, build tables, not walls. I placed it on the stack and looked at the room. My system was working. The seating was non-hierarchical. Grandma June was flanked by Rain's children, who were explaining something on a phone with grave seriousness. Aunt Marla was sitting with Evan and Maya, telling a story that made them all laugh. Everyone was in the front row. Everyone had the view. I felt a sudden, crushing need for air. Not bad air, just Air. The emotion in the room was a physical weight, a density of belonging I had not calculated. I slid open the heavy door to the balcony. The wind barriers were perfect. They cut the gale to a stiff, cold breeze. The heat lamps kicked on, bathing the space in a warm, reddish glow. The roar of the city rose up, a wave of pure, human sound. I stepped to the railing. I was above it all. I was the architect. For my entire life, I had been on the outside of the glass, looking in. The girl on the carpet in Ohio, the student in the empty lab. Even in this penthouse, I had been the observer. Tonight, I was looking back in through the glass. I could see them, all of them, laughing, eating, my family, the ones who had been left in the margins. My reflection was in the glass, superimposed over them. For the first time, I was not outside the frame. I was in the picture. The door slid open behind me. It was Grandma June, one of the thick wool blankets wrapped around her shoulders. She stood next to me, gripping the railing. She was not afraid of the height. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the rivers of light, the absolute spectacle of it. "Your mother," June said, her voice almost carried away by the wind. She always thought family was a thing to be curated, like a prize rosebush. She would prune anyone who wasn't perfect, anyone who was too much, or not enough. She pruned Marla, she pruned me, and she tried her damnedest to prune you. She turned to look at me, her old eyes sharp in the red glow of the lamps. "But you're not a cutting, Noelle. You're the root system." She looked back into the room. In Judith's house, the light is always on Savannah. It has to be. A single, hot spotlight. It's so bright on her. Everyone else is forced to be in the shadows. She pointed with her chin. "But look in there." I looked. The room was bathed in a diffuse, warm, golden light. Everyone was illuminated. "Tonight," my grandmother said, a small, hard smile on her face. "Tonight, everyone is bright." I felt a tightness in my throat. I just nodded. In the far corner of the room, almost invisible, a small white gimbal camera on a tripod was whirring. It panned smoothly, silently. It was my personal unit. It was recording everything: the laughter, the light, the table, the view. Not for the world, not for revenge, just for the archive. A quiet, objective witness to prove that this night was real, that this joy was not a simulation, that we were, for this one moment, all here and all bright. At 11:50 p.m., the atmosphere in the penthouse changed. The warm, conversational jazz faded. Evan and the violinist put down their instruments, and I switched the sound system to a direct, clean audio feed from the street below. The city's noise was no longer a distant roar. It was an immediate, palpable presence. We all moved to the windows. The long table, now littered with the beautiful debris of a feast, was abandoned. Everyone, from Rain's 6-year-old to my grandmother, was pressed against the glass. Down below, the movement of the crowd was no longer human. It had become geological. It was a tidal surge of light and energy, a single, massive organism made of 1,000,000 people, all breathing in one direction. The police barriers were the only things holding back a literal sea of bodies. The light from the screens was so bright it pulsed, making the falling snow look like streaks of static. It's so many," Rain whispered, her hand on her son's shoulder. "Look," Evan said, pointing. "The ball. It's starting to move." It was 11:59. The digital clock on my wall was now a focal point. It was 11:59 and 50 seconds. The entire world, 1,000,000 people below us and 30 people in my room, went utterly silent. The planet seemed to hold its breath. The only sound was the high-pitched, electric hum of the city waiting. And then, the sound from the audio feed changed. It was not a cheer. It was a single, unified, guttural roar, a human chorus that rose from the concrete. 10! The voice hit the glass. 9! Rain's kids were screaming the numbers, their faces lit by the strobing billboards. 8! I looked at Grandma June. Her hand was on the glass. Her eyes were not on the crowd, but on the ball itself. 7, 6. I slid open the balcony door. The cold and the sound slammed into us. A physical, joyous assault. The wind barriers held, but the noise was everywhere. 5, 4. I stepped out onto the balcony, into the cold, into the roar. 3. I was not on the outside looking in. 2. I was not in the garage. 1. I was not in the silent house in Ohio. Happy New Year! The world exploded. It was not a sound. It was a concussion. The fireworks shot up, not from a distance, but from the rooftops around us. We were not watching them. We were in them. They burst like supernovas. Silent, brilliant explosions of chemical fire that lit the sky in reds and blues and whites, brighter than the city's own light. And then, the confetti. It did not just fall. It erupted from the buildings, not just paper, but ecological, biodegradable material, designed to look like a blizzard of stardust. It was a billion tiny pieces of light, swirling upward in the thermal drafts from the buildings, catching the pyrotechnic glare. It was a rain of stars, falling in reverse. My gimbal camera, which I had positioned on the balcony, whirred to life and focused on me. I did not know it. I did not care. I was looking up, my face turned to the sky, and this blizzard of light and joy, and for about 10 seconds, the lens captured something I had never allowed myself in a family context, a smile, not a polite, responsible, self-sufficient smile, but a wide, unmanaged, unguarded expression of pure, unadulterated freedom. I was a person who was not needed, not responsible, not invisible. I was just there. I was just free. Behind me, someone had the presence of mind to put on music. Of course, it was Evan. He had picked up his acoustic guitar, and he struck the first, broad, hopeful chord of Auld Lang Syne. It was imperfect. It was real. Inside, the room became a tangle of arms. Rain was hugging her kids. Aunt Marla was hugging my grandmother. Evan's girlfriend, Maya, was hugging him, her head on his chest. It was a surge of warmth, a spontaneous, messy, genuine expression of belonging. The moment was perfect, and perfect moments, in the modern world, are never truly private. Rain's eldest, Leo, who had been given his phone back to take pictures, was recording. He was 8. He was not filming the fireworks. He was filming his family hugging, his grandmother crying with joy, the long table, the endless food. And then he turned the camera to the window, capturing the impossible view of the supernova fireworks at eye level. He was just a kid. He did not know about privacy. He did not know about strategy. He just knew this was the coolest thing that had ever happened to him. He opened his mom's social media app, the one she used to share art projects with other teachers, and he posted the 30-second video to her story. He did not add a caption. He did not have to. The app, being a logical system, recognized the location data. It added the tag automatically, a simple, white, capitalized geotag in the upper left corner. Times Square Penthouse. The video was not public. Rain's account was private. It was just visible to her network. A few hundred people, teachers, friends, and of course, the extended, complicated, intertwined network of our family. It was a small data packet, a tiny, insignificant video, but it moved through the family group chats like a piece of malware. It was shared, and shared again. A cousin in Chicago sent it to an aunt in Florida. Is this real? Look at June. Is that Noelle's aunt, Marla? Wait, where are they? The tag says Times Square Penthouse. Whose is that? The data had breached containment. Cut scene, parallel. 250 miles south, in a suburb that smelled of wet leaves and quiet judgment. My family was gathered, the real family. My mother, Judith, my father, Robert, my sister, Savannah, and her loud, boisterous husband, and their 2 perfect, overstimulated children. They were not in a penthouse. They were in a finished basement, on a beige sectional sofa. The room smelled of my mother's potpourri and Savannah's husband's beer. They were watching the same broadcast, on a massive 70-inch flat-screen television, but they were watching it the way I used to, as a spectacle, a thing happening far away, to other, more important people. 10, 9, 8, Savannah's children screamed, their voices shrill, mimicking the television. Happy New Year, my father boomed, raising his glass of champagne. To the family. To the family, my mother echoed, smiling, but her eyes were already checking the carpet for spills. It was perfect. It was curated. It was exactly the holiday she had wanted. And then, the phones began to vibrate. It was not one phone. It was all of them. A sudden, angry, seismic buzz from the coffee table. My mother's phone. My father's phone. Savannah's phone. It was the extended family chat, the one my mother usually used to post pictures of Savannah's kids. My mother, annoyed at the interruption, picked up her phone. Who on earth? She opened the chat. She saw the video. The audio, on her phone, was tiny. The sound of Evan's guitar. The sound of Rain's laughter. The video was clear. It showed Aunt Marla, her eyes wet with joy. It showed Grandma June, sitting at a table, raising a glass. It showed the confetti. It showed the view. And it showed the geotag, Times Square Penthouse. My mother's hand went to her throat. Robert, she said, her voice a dry whisper. What is it, Judith? Whose phone is that? Savannah asked, annoyed, pulling her child away from the screen. It's Marla. And June. My father's face, flushed with champagne, went slack. What? Where are they? They're here, my mother said, her mind not processing. In the city. Before anyone else could speak, her phone vibrated again, a direct text from her cousin. Judith, why aren't you with your mother? Whose place is that? Another text, from a second cousin. I didn't know you were all in New York. Why didn't you tell us? Is that Noelle? I just saw the back of her head. A third. That apartment must be worth a fortune. Who is hosting? What is this? Savannah said, snatching my mother's phone. Her face went through a rapid series of emotions. Confusion, to disbelief, to a dark, acidic jealousy. They're having a party, without us. That's not possible, my father stammered. Marla can't afford that. June can't. Who? And then, on the 70-inch television in front of them, the broadcast, in its sweeping, post-midnight coverage, did a panoramic sweep of the towers. The camera panned up, past the crowds, past the mid-level buildings, and lingered for a moment on the highest residential towers. And on their screen, in high definition, the camera caught a glimpse of a single, high, wraparound balcony, a balcony filled with people, a flash of confetti, caught in an eddy of wind, swirled up from the balcony, a tiny, glittering anomaly. It was living proof. It was my balcony. My mother's face went white, not just pale, a bloodless, chalky, papery white. Robert, she said, her voice shaking. That's the building. My father was just staring, his mouth open. He had no file for this, no logic. It's probably a rental, he stammered. A hotel. They probably all chipped in and rented it for the night. A cheap shot? Even as he said it, he knew. You do not rent that. He looked at my mother's face, and he knew he was not convincing anyone, not even himself. My mother's mind, which was as fast and logistical as my own, was already putting the pieces together. The exclusion, the perfect text, my silence, the sudden, coordinated gathering of everyone she had cut. It was not a coincidence. It was a strategy. Up high, in the penthouse, I knew nothing of this. The data was spreading, but I was not monitoring it. I was in the moment. The song ended. The cheers in the room were warm. I closed the balcony door to bring the warmth back in. the roar of the city once again becoming a silent, glittering movie. I walked, my legs feeling light, over to the small hook I had installed by the door, the brushed steel hook that had been a private joke. I took the heavy, cold steel elevator key from my pocket. I looked at the small, engraved symbol on it. I hung it on the hook. It was not a joke anymore. It was not a symbol. It was a statement. This was my house. This was my door. And I was the one who decided who was on the list. The key was here, not hidden away. It was a silent declaration, hanging in the open, for everyone to see. The power was not in the exclusion, it was in the invitation, and the door was now open. The morning light was relentless. It poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows, a clean, sterile, golden light that was the opposite of the electric chaos of the night before. The city, from this high up, looked quiet, almost peaceful. In the January 1st sun, the penthouse was silent, save for the hum of the coffee machine. Most of the guests had been put up in a hotel block I had reserved, the cars having taken them in the early hours of the morning. Only the core remained. Rain and her kids were asleep in the guest wing. Aunt Marla, too. But my grandmother, June, was an early riser. She was sitting at the long, now cleared table, wearing one of my softer robes, a thick wool blanket over her knees. She was holding the herbal teapot I had given her, steam rising in a thin, straight line in the bright sunlight. I was at the counter, pouring 2 cups of black coffee. My phone, which I had left to charge on the counter, vibrated. The sound was harsh, invasive in the morning calm. I looked at the screen. It was not a text. It was a call. The screen read, "Mom." I did not move for a second. I just looked at it. My heart rate did not quicken. I felt no panic. I felt only the logical certainty of the next step in the sequence. June looked up at me. Her eyes were sharp. She had heard the vibration. She saw the name on the screen. She saw my stillness. I picked up the phone. I pressed accept, and then I pressed the small icon for speaker. I placed the phone flat on the cold quartz countertop between us. "Noelle?" My mother's voice was not the voice I was used to. It was not the crisp, instructional tone. It was a low, tight, vibrating wire of absolute fury. "I'm here, Mom," I said. My voice was calm. I picked up my coffee cup. "I do not know what kind of stunt you think you just pulled," she began. The words clipped. "But you have embarrassed this entire family. You have made us a laughingstock. We have been getting calls all night. All night. What were you thinking? Flaunting. Whatever that was. In front of everyone? It was a spectacle. It was pathetic and cruel." I took a sip of coffee. It was hot, bitter. "What spectacle are you referring to?" "Do not play games with me. Noelle. That party. That apartment. Throwing it in our faces. Inviting stragglers. You did it just to humiliate us." Grandma June sat perfectly still, her hands wrapped around her warm teapot. She watched the phone as if it were a small, venomous animal. "I don't think I did," I said, my voice level. "I was just following your instructions. You were very clear. New Year's was just for Savannah's family. So I made other plans, with my family." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. I heard a muffled sound. My father's voice. The phone was clearly on speaker on their end as well. "Noelle?" My father, Robert, his voice was not furious. It was weak, bewildered, and trying to puff itself up. "This isn't you. This showing off? This arrogance? A $7 million apartment? Is that what this is about? Money? You think you can just buy a bigger house and that makes you, what, better than us?" I leaned against the counter. The sunlight was warm on my back. "I didn't buy a house, Dad," I said quietly. "I built a place. I built a place for people who were willing to show up. I built a table long enough for everyone who wanted a seat. You weren't on the list because you told me very clearly that you had better plans." You little," my mother started, her voice rising in pitch. That is quite enough, Judith. My grandmother's voice was not loud, but it was heavy. It was a physical object that dropped into the conversation and silenced everyone. She had not spoken to the phone. She had spoken to the room, knowing they would hear her. On the other end of the line, absolute profound silence. "Mom," my father said, his voice a fraction of its former size. You're there?" "I am here," June said, her voice like dry ice. "I am sitting in the most beautiful home I have ever seen, drinking the best tea of my life, after the first real family gathering I have attended in a decade. I am here." "Mom, she tricked you," Judith tried. "She invited me," June snapped, her voice cutting like glass. "Which is more than you did. You, Judith, you excluded me. You excluded your sister. You excluded your nieces and nephews. You excluded the son of your dead brother, and you did it, as you have done for 20 years, to make sure nothing and no one would cast a shadow on Savannah." I watched my grandmother. She was not angry. This was not a tirade. It was a final, cold, clinical reading of the charges. "You turned family," June continued, her words precise, "into a one-woman show, a stage for Savannah, her grades, her boyfriends, her wedding, her children. We were not invited to a family. We were invited to be an audience, and when we did not applaud loud enough, or when our own lives were inconveniently complicated, we were cut from the program. You pruned, and you pruned, and you pruned, until all that was left was your perfect, tiny, suffocating little stage." She paused, and the silence from the phone was so deep I could hear the faint, electronic hiss of the open line. I heard someone breathing, a ragged, watery sound. It might have been my mother. "Last night," June said, her voice softening just a fraction, "Noelle did not perform a stunt. She did not show off. She took a lifetime of the pieces you threw away, and she built a mosaic. She fixed what you tore apart." A choked sound came from the phone. Then, nothing. Just the sound of two people, in a beige room in Ohio, breathing. The sound of their entire, curated world collapsing. Their logic had no answer for this. Their narrative had just been ripped apart by its own matriarch. The silence stretched. 10 seconds, 20, 30. It was the sound of defeat. I picked up the phone. My hand was steady. "I have to go," I said, my voice still quiet. "The next time we speak, it will be because you want to. When you are ready to listen, you can come. You know where I am, but you will not come here to blame me. You will not come here to accuse me. That is over now. This is my home. The rules are different here." I pressed the red end button. I set the phone back down on the counter. The silence in the penthouse was vast, but it was a peaceful, clean silence. June took a slow sip of her tea. She did not look at me. She looked out the window, at the sharp, clear blue of the sky. My phone buzzed again, this time on the counter, a text. I glanced at it. It was from Rain, sent from the guest room. "My kids just asked if we can do this every single year. No pressure." Another buzz. Aunt Marla. "Noelle, I have no words. Thank you. I feel seen. First time in forever." Another, "Evan, this was legendary. 'Cause you've changed the game. Let's make it a tradition." I smiled. A small, private smile. The system was not just built. It was self-sustaining. Then, one final, angry vibration. A new number, but I knew who it was. Savannah. The text was short. Cheap move. "Noelle, you think you're so smart. You just wanted to make them all hate me. Hope you're happy. You're still the one who is alone." I read the words. I felt the old, familiar sting. The reflexive need to justify, to defend. It was the muscle memory of a lifetime of being the other. I watched the message bubble for a second. Then I set the phone down. Screen side down, on the counter. I did not reply. I walked over to the table and sat opposite my grandmother. I picked up my coffee. June reached across the table and touched my wrist. Her skin was like paper, but her grip was firm. She will be the last one to understand, June said quietly. Her entire world is built on the idea that your light does not exist. She looked me right in the eye. Do not dim your light, Noelle, not ever again. Do not make yourself small to accommodate someone else's shadow. I held her gaze, and in the bright, unfiltered, morning after sunlight, I nodded, I drank my coffee, and for the first time, I was not cold. 3 days later, the penthouse was silent. The long oaken table that had held a feast for 30 was gone, returned to storage. In its place was a small, round table, a simple circle of dark wood, set for 4. I had not asked Chef Luca to return. I had made the meal myself. It was the simplest, most basic food I could think of. A deep, slow-cooked tomato soup and a loaf of rosemary bread I had baked that morning. The scent of rosemary was the only echo of the party, a deliberate thread of continuity. I did not set the table with candles or flowers, just 4 bowls, 4 spoons, 4 glasses of water. The setting was intentionally austere. This was not a celebration, it was a deposition. The elevator chimed its soft, respectful ding. I stood by the fireplace as the doors opened. My father, Robert, my mother, Judith, and my sister, Savannah. They stepped out, not as a conquering force, but as refugees. They looked small in the vast, open space. They were dressed in their suburban, nice clothes, the outfits they would wear to a somber dinner. They had come as a unit, a closed system, but the energy between them was fractured. They stopped. They looked at the windows, at the view. It was late afternoon, and the city was a tapestry of sharp, cold light. "You're home," my mother said. Her voice was thin, and the words caught in her throat. "It's beautiful, Noelle." She was trembling. "It's a lot of glass," I said. I did not move to help them. I did not offer to take their coats. I just watched them. They took off their own coats, folding them awkwardly over the back of a chair. They were visitors in a foreign land. "Please, sit," I said, gesturing to the small table. They sat. The chairs were heavy, and the sound of them scraping on the stone floor was loud. There was no jazz. There was no music at all. The only sound was the low electric hum of the fireplace and the distant, almost imperceptible sound of the city's ventilation. I went to the kitchen, which was open to the room, and ladled the soup into the 4 bowls. I brought them over, 2 at a time. I placed the bread and a small dish of butter on the table. Then I sat down. The silence was the loudest thing in the room. My father picked up his spoon. My mother stared into the bowl. Savannah kept her hands clenched in her lap. The sound of my father's spoon touching the ceramic bowl was a crack, click. He took a bite. This is good, Noelle." I did not reply. I just watched them. Click, scrape, click. The sounds were an agony. The tension in the room was a physical weight, a dense, unbreathable air. I was the one who had set the meeting. It was my system, my logic. It was up to me to open the proceedings. I put my spoon down. It made no sound. "In 1999, I said, my voice as calm and level as the horizon. "I was 14. You went to the local countdown without me. I was told to watch the house." My mother's eyes snapped up. My father's spoon froze halfway to his mouth. "In 2003, I continued, "I was 18. I was accepted to a university on the West Coast. I was told it was inconvenient. I took a bus. At 2 a.m, alone. There was no goodbye." "Noelle," my father started. "We didn't mean—" "I am not done," I said. I was not angry. I was simply stating the data. 2007, my graduation. Savannah had a soccer tournament. You went to that. I received a text message. 2010, 2012, 2015. A list of Thanksgivings, Christmases, and holidays where I was the logistical support, the coordinator, or the one left behind. I looked at all of them, one by one. And 4 days ago, the final data point, just Savannah's family, an email, not even a call, a statement of fact. You pruned the list. I was not on it. I leaned back. These are the facts. This is the system you built. I am not here to argue about them. They are not negotiable. They are the truth. The silence that followed was different. It was not empty. It was full of their reactions. My father put his spoon down. He looked at his hands, at the calluses he had been proud of his whole life. He seemed fascinated by them. He started. His voice was thick. I didn't see it. That's the truth. I didn't see it. You were always so self-sufficient. You were so capable. You fixed the router. You handled the taxes. You never asked for anything. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. You were so good at taking care of yourself. I thought you didn't need us. I thought you didn't want us. I said nothing. I just held his gaze. My mother, who had been staring at her soup as if it held the answers, finally spoke. Her voice was not the furious shriek from the phone. It was a brittle, hollow whisper. I thought you were strong, she said. I looked at her. I always saw you as the strong one, she said, her eyes filling, the tears spilling over and dropping into her soup. You were like stone. And Savannah was so much. She was so fragile. She needed so much. She needed the light. She needed the reassurance. Her breath hitched. It was a mistake, I know, but I thought you were the one who could handle the shadow. I thought you were strong enough. So no one needed to be there for you. I thought you were fine. I am not stone. I thought I am the logical result of your actions. Then, Savannah. She had not moved, had not touched her food. She was staring at the bread. I was the star, she whispered. I turned my head to her. I wasn't trying to, she said, her voice small, a child's voice. I was doing what they wanted. I followed the script. I was the bright one. I was the one who needed help. I did what they told me to do. She looked at me, her eyes, for the first time, holding not jealousy, but a dawning, horrific comprehension. I didn't know, she whispered. I didn't know that my being me was a way of making you not. I didn't know that my light was I just thought it was my light. I didn't know I was minimizing other people. The room was full. The truth was on the table, next to the cooling soup. They were waiting. They were waiting for me to absolve them, to yell, to cry, to give them a cue for the next scene. They were waiting for an apology to be requested, so they could give it. I don't want your apologies, I said, and the finality of it made them all flinch. An apology is a word, I said. It is a transaction. It is what you say to make yourselves feel better about the data. I am not interested in your feelings. I am interested in your actions. I stood up. I walked to the counter, where 3 flat black envelopes had been sitting. I brought them back to the table. I slid one to my father, one to my mother, and one to Savannah. They just stared at them. This is not a fortress, I said, gesturing to the room. But it is not a public park, either. This is my space. This is my table. And it is a place for people who are willing to be responsible, who are willing to listen, who are willing to see the whole picture, not just the part that makes them feel good. I tapped the envelopes. The door to this penthouse is open. It is open for you, but it is only open when you choose to listen, when you are ready to be present and accountable for the space you take up. My father ran his thumb over the sharp black paper. My mother's hand hovered over hers, afraid to touch it. Savannah was different. She turned her envelope over. It was the only one with something written on it. Her name. I looked at her. Yours is different. Yours is not just an invitation. It's a proposal. She looked at me, confused. I am having the party again next year, I said. Rain's kids. They want a kid's corner, but not a separate table. A place. Inside the room, so they feel included, but not overwhelmed. I have the architectural plans. I am not good at that part. The human part. The soft part. You are. Savannah's head came up, her expression one of pure shock. That envelope, I said, is an invitation to design it with me, to co-build, to be my partner. Your call, if you want. I stepped back. I had run my simulation. I had presented the data. I had offered the next logical step. The system was now theirs to engage with. My father stood up. He was a tall man, but he seemed shorter. He put his black envelope in his coat pocket. He walked over to me. He did not go to hug me. He held out his hand. I looked at it, then I shook it. His grip was firm, desperate. "Noelle," he said. That was all. My mother stood. She was a wreck. Her face was splotchy, her eyes red. She walked to me, and for a second, I thought she was going to scream at me again. Instead, she just put her arms around me. It was not a hug. It was a brief, awkward, clumsy collision. It was a gesture, a first draft. She let go almost immediately. She, too, put her envelope in her purse. She did not look at me. Savannah was the last one. She stood, clutching her envelope, the one with the proposal. She looked at me, then at our parents, then back at me. She did not know what to do. She gave a small, jerky nod. Then she hurried after them. I walked them to the elevator. I pressed the button. The doors opened. They stepped in. They turned. 3 ghosts in a steel box. "Noelle," my mother said, just as the doors began to close. "The soup. It was very good." The doors closed. I was alone again. The silence was immediate. The 4 bowls of soup were on the table. 3 of them were barely touched. I did not clean them up. I walked past the table, past the fireplace. I went to the balcony. I slid the massive door open. The cold hit me. It was night. The city was a galaxy of lights beneath me. The roar was constant, a steady white noise. I stood at the railing. I was not waiting for a countdown. I was not watching a ball drop. I was just breathing. The clock on the wall had started a new countdown, 362 days. I was not counting down. I was not stuck at 1, waiting for the world to explode. I was at the beginning. I was at day 3. I was counting up. A year passed. A year is a long time. It is a long, slow, logical sequence of days. It is enough time for a system to be tested, for data to be gathered, for a new pattern to emerge. Savannah's proposal, the one in the black envelope, had been activated. The first meeting was in February, in my apartment, on a cold, bright Tuesday. She was terrified. She brought a binder, full of nervous, bad ideas. "No, Savannah," I said, pointing to her sketch of a separate, cordoned-off playpen. "You're still building a wall. You're just putting glitter on it. This isn't a kid's table. This is an inclusion corner. How do you make a 6-year-old feel like they are at the party, not just at the party's location?" She stared at me, and then she got it. The why clicked. We worked on it for months. It was not always easy. It was 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but she was present. She was learning my language, the language of systems and intent, and I was, reluctantly, learning hers, the language of softness and comfort. She sourced the thickest, softest, small gray blankets. She found child-sized, noise-canceling headphones in case the roar was too much for the little ears. My idea was to have them print name tags. Her idea was better. A wall of instant film photos, taken as each guest arrived, so the kids could see all the faces, so they would know who was safe and who was family. It was a good system. It was our system. This year, the invitation was not a targeted, strategic operation. It was an open broadcast. I sent one. Simple, digital card to everyone. To Rain, to Evan, to Aunt Marla, to Grandma June, and to my parents, and to Savannah. The rule was simple. The door opens at 7. There is a place for everyone who comes. There is no head of the table, There is no edge. The response, this time, was different. My father was the first to reply. Judith and I would like that very much. Noelle, is there anything? Can we come early? To help? I looked at the message. Action, not words. The kitchen is open at 5, I replied. They came. They came at 5. They walked into the penthouse, and this time, they were not ghosts. They were just two people, looking awkward, carrying a grocery bag. We didn't know what to bring, my mother said. She was holding a bunch of celery. Luca is handling the main course, I said. But I could use someone to chop vegetables for the base. My mother, Judith, the woman who curated dinner parties like a general, just nodded. She took off her coat. She went to the sink. She washed her hands, and she began to chop celery. My father, Robert, stood there, useless. Dad, I said, I need the ice buckets filled. His face lit up. Ice, yes, I can do that. It was an action. It was a start. The guests arrived. The night was a perfect echo of the last, but deeper, richer. The music was the same. The roar of the city was the same, but we were different. Grandma June arrived, not with her cane, but on Evan's arm, and she was carrying something, a wrapped object. Noelle, she said, her voice full of a rare, bright energy. This is for the table. She unwrapped it. It was her old teapot, the one from her house in Ohio. It was simple, ceramic, and chipped at the spout. My herbal infusion one is for me, she said, tapping the old pot. This one is for the family. It's been dry for too long. It should be at the center. She placed it in the middle of the long oak table. It was not valuable. It was not beautiful. But it was the heart. It was the tradition we had lost. Now returned. The night moved. The laughter was louder this year. The inclusion corner was a wild success. Rain's kids were teaching my father how to use the instant camera. He looked baffled and completely, ridiculously happy. Savannah was in the center of it, not as a star, but as a sister, a real one. She was showing them how to hang the photos. At 11:40 p.m., I was standing by the fireplace, just watching my system work. The warmth, the light, the noise. My mother walked up to me. She was quiet. She had been helping Luca in the kitchen. Her cheeks flushed from the heat. Noelle, she said. Mom. She did not say anything. She just walked past me, to the wall by the balcony door, to the single, brushed steel hook. My key was hanging there, the one I had hung last year, the symbol of my house, my rules. With a hand that was almost steady, Judith, my mother, reached up. She did not look at me. She just looked at the key. She lifted it off the hook. My entire body went cold. I did not breathe. This was not in the system. This was an override. She turned to me. The key was in her open palm. The light from the city glinted off the cold, hard steel. I understand, she said. Her voice was a whisper. Just for me. Beneath the music. Beneath the laughter. I understand what this is. She held it out to me. You keep it, she said, her voice breaking, just for a second. This door, it belongs to you. It was always supposed to belong to you, and you decide who you invite inside. I looked at her, at the woman who had spent a lifetime deciding who was in and who was out, and here she was, handing me the very definition of power and ceding it. I took the key from her hand. It was warm from her skin. Thank you, I said. It was my turn. I went to the intentions corner. The black cards were there, but this year, they were full. I saw them all. Rains, leave, the B list, take, the only list. And then I saw Savannah's. She must have done it when she arrived. Her handwriting was clear, steady. Leave, the privilege of being coddled. Take, the responsibility of being a sister. My father's was there, clumsy, in his all-caps print. Leave, my silence. Take, the work of atoning. I picked up the gold pen. I took a card. Leave, knocking on the glass. I turned it over. Take. Opening the door. 11:59 and 50 seconds. The room went silent. We all went to the glass. 10. The roar from the street, from our own voices. 9. My mother was on one side of me. My grandmother was on the other. 8. I saw Savannah, across the room, put the noise-canceling headphones on Rain's youngest. She smiled at him. 7, 6, 5. My father was at the window, his arm around my mother. 4, 3. I was not alone. 2, 1. The world exploded, the fireworks, the confetti, the joy. This time, I had programmed the gimbal camera. It did not just watch me. It panned. It panned slowly, across the room. It captured Rain's face, lit by blue fireworks. It captured Evan, kissing Maya. It captured my grandmother, her hand on the old teapot, smiling. It captured my father, weeping silently into my mother's shoulder. It captured Savannah, pointing at the sky for the kids. It captured a room full of people, all of them, all bright, all present. The music swelled. Evan, this time, was ready. Auld Lang Syne. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from the family group chat that Rain had created. Aunt Marla. Next year, same time? Evan. I'm in. I'll write a new song for it. I smiled. I looked at the key in my hand. I looked at the hook on the wall. I walked over. I hung the key back up. The original, the symbol. Then, I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a second key, a spare, one I had cut a week ago. I hung it on the hook, right next to the first. I took a small black tag from my pocket. It had been in the proposal envelope Savannah and I had worked on. It was her idea. I looped the tag onto the spare key. The gold script on it was clear. For those who are late, but truly want to belong. I stepped back. The party was in full swing. The roar of the city was a celebration. The laughter in the room was real. I went to the balcony. I slid the door open and stepped out into the cold, confetti-filled air. This was not a fortress. This was not a vantage point. This was not a statement. This was a bridge. The knot in my chest, the one that had been pulled tight for 20 years, the one that defined me as outside, as other, as excluded, it had not been cut. It had not been broken. It had been patiently, logically, and finally, untied, canceled by the simple, profound, powerful right to invite everyone else in, to stand in the light, and to be warm. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment below with where you're listening from so we can share our thoughts. Make sure to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us your support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by many more.